Hello, my beautiful beings of light. Today, I'm going to talk about the 7 different types of ADD. And it was really interesting to me because, first off, let me introduce myself. My name is Janae Robinson. I'm a spiritual life coach who works with women with ADHD, particularly late diagnosed ADHD, because I am one as well. And what I found really interesting recently was that there are 7 different types of ADD. It's probably because I've only been diagnosed in the past 2 years. I just knew I was diagnosed by my therapist that, okay, yes, I definitely think that you have ADHD. Because in women, our hyperactivity tends to be in the brain more than it is the body. But then as I'm researching and learning more about myself, I came upon this survey, this ebook that was done by this clinic called Amen Clinics. And they do a lot with neurodivergent brains, brain scans, all of that stuff. And so they released this ebook about the 7 different types of ADD. So I wanted to share the information with you guys, those neurodivergent people out there who maybe didn't know that there were 7 different types, and then see which one vibes with you more. If you want, you can dive in deeper with a psychiatrist or with your therapist or whatever the case may be. But I just think this knowledge is wonderful for people to know. So let's dive in. Type 1 is going to be classic ADD, and this is the one that has actual hyperactivity in the body and also in the mind. So with the classic ADD, you have, of course, the hyperactivity, but constantly interrupting, or rather it seems like they're not truly listening, constantly interrupting in conversations, restlessness. It's going to include hold on, let me double check here. Has difficulty waiting their turn, talks excessively, and poor attention to detail, which is, honestly, that's across the board with ADD generally. And so what happens in the classic ADD, and what I was noticing in these different types, is that it's also very, where the brain is activated and deactivated is very similar across the board, but we're going to go through it. So there's going to be, I have my little brain chart here for you to make things easier so you can see, hopefully. So there is decreased blood flow in the prefrontal cortex, which is going to be, can y'all see? It's this right here in the brain. I'm going to see if I can point it out properly to you. Prefrontal cortex is like right here. And then also on top of that, what's also going to happen is that there is reduced blood flow in the cerebellum and the left and right basal ganglia, I think is what it is. It's structures deep within the brain that help produce the neurotransmitter dopamine. And for those who have ADD, we all know dopamine is really a huge issue for us as far as us having low levels of it. So the basal ganglia is this little thing right here. Let me see if I can go close to the screen with it. It's this little thing right here that looks like something. Anyways, that right there. In the left and right, that's when you're going to see that's when you're going to see blood flow in that area, but decreased activity during concentration, which is so interesting that when we concentrate, like shit just shuts down. There you go. So that is classic ADD. And one of the ways this ebook also will tell you ways to manage it as well. But one way to manage it is frequent movement, which I've heard this as well. Like for people who have classic ADD, those where their body is hyperactive, they have to do frequent movement because it's a matter of, if we're getting into the spiritual side, everything is energy. So it's literally a buildup of energy in your system that you have to get out. Otherwise, everything is connected. Mind, body, spirit is connected. So it affects the brain, all of that. So frequent movement is really necessary. This applies also to, of course, it applies to children because, of course, kids, this is actually, the ebook is centered more towards kids, but we're all kids in grown bodies. But very much in how children are educated. Children with ADD are educated. They can't sit for long periods of time. Me, myself. can't sit for long periods of time when you have classic ADD. You need to have some sort of movement, whether it's getting up, moving around. If you're doing a test, breaking it up into like 20-minute installations, doing, okay, we're going to sit and we're going to work on these amount of problems within 20 minutes, get up, move around, sit back down, whatever the case may be. So yeah, frequent movement. And then it says, make it a competition. Which is always a fun thing to do. And then also an organized and creative workspace is also another way to manage classic ADD. So now we're going to go on to type 2. Now, type 2 is going to be inattentive ADD. And that is basically, it's the same as type 1, with a decreased activity during concentration in the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and the basal ganglia. I feel like I'm saying that wrong, but we're going to flow with it, ganglia. But the difference is that they're not hyperactive. That's like the major difference. And with this one, I'm going to say this is the one that's almost more hyperactive in the head a bit. So some of the symptoms are difficulty maintaining focus, tendency to lose things, complaints of being bored, appearing unmotivated and apathetic, being tired, sluggish, or slow moving, and appearing spacey or preoccupied. Basically, it's going to be those people that when you're younger, they said you were scatterbrained and couldn't focus. That's the inattentive ones right there. That's the inattentive ADD. And so, yeah, they're often are never properly diagnosed because they're not shown as having impulsive or hyperactive traits as the classic ADD would have. And there is another type of ADD where impulsivity is a huge factor of it, but that's going to be coming a bit later. Those with inattentive ADD tend to be introverted, and may have trouble finding motivation in life. And that ties back to the dopamine levels as well in our brain, right? It's that motivation for anything, not just, people tend to conflate dopamine with the happy chemical or whatever, but it's just any motivation. It's motivating for anything, right? So that is inattentive ADD, and one way of managing that is the reward system. So I find this really interesting because a lot of times you'll hear studies saying the reward system should not be given to children because it makes it seem like you have to like the reward system can actually be damaging for children. But I think those studies were done more on neurotypical children, whereas the reward system is beneficial for people with ADD. And I know I love it. Visual checklists is a huge thing. Writing it down so we can visually see it and check it off is a huge thing as well. So that's very important for inattentive ADD. And then also straightforward directions. I cannot tell you how important straightforward directions are for us. I mean, like, okay, and I'm going to break this down even further with the straightforward directions. For neurotypical people, your idea of directions, ADD minds break that down. What maybe one step for you, we break it down into 6 steps, right? Our brain takes it, we dissect it deeper. So you have to give us like straightforward directions. And if we ask you a question, if you're explaining something and then we ask something, don't get offended, because in our brain that we've already, if you give me a task to do, I've either decided what way to do it or if you tell me to do it a certain way, I have questions because now I'm dissecting. Okay, they told me this one way to do it, but let me break this down into even smaller directions, right? So straightforward directions help us a lot. So that is going to be the inattentive ADD. And I kind of actually really vibed with the inattentive ADD when I was reading it. But yeah, anyways, the directions particularly that establish fair and realistic expectations. And that's very, very, very important. So reward system, which is rewarding good behavior and withholding privileges when negative behavior occurs. And yeah, so I co-sign on that reward system. Now here's type 3, over-focused ADD. And what happens with this is that they get stuck on thoughts and have difficulty shifting their attention. We would know it as hyperfocus, right? And unfortunately, that also works with negative thoughts. You hyper focus on a particular thought and you can't shift your mind anywhere else. And it's caused by increased activity in the brain. It's actually an area of the brain called the anterior cingulate. Do I have that on my little chart? Oh, I don't. So I can't even show you guys. Okay. But it's known as the brain's gear shifter. But either way, in addition, just like all the other the previous types of ADD, you're still going to have a decreased flow during concentration in the, once again, prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia. So that's where you're going to have, and the cerebellum as well. Sorry, which is basically the cerebellum is the underside here. That's the cerebellum. So that's where you're going to have a decreased activity. So over focused ADD, that's where the impulsivity now comes into place. Excessive worrying, struggle to see options, the tendency to hold grudges, obsessive and inflexible, holding on to their opinions without listening to others, and they may or may not be hyperactive. So very much, as I said, hyper-focused on different things. It has been, what I found interesting about this, in this report, it says that this type has been mistaken for obsessive compulsive disorder. So because the impulsivity, once again, is a factor in over-focused ADD. So a lot of people, they actually can get misdiagnosed. So those who think they have OCD, you may have over-focused ADD, which is really interesting. The more I looked into this, the more I realized that a lot of one mental difference can be misdiagnosed as another one, because they're very, very similar together. So it's very interesting. So people with OCD typically aren't impulsive, whereas those with overfocused ADD are often impulsive. And they have trouble with cognitive processing. So they aren't inattentive, but they're rather over attentive to details. And it's often seen in substance abusers, as well as in the children and grandchildren of alcoholics, which is really interesting because, ADD is genetic. They've proven that ADD is genetic. Now, to manage it, this is something that across the board, well, everybody should be doing, but particularly people with ADD need to be doing 30 to 45 minutes of exercise every single day. That's to increase the dopamine and serotonin levels in the brain. And of course, exercising boosts both of those. It can help distract from obsessive thoughts, provide relaxation for open-mindedness, and boost blood flow to the brain, which is why a lot of times people, if they have a lot of stuff going on, they'll be like, I'm just going to go for a run, or whatever the case may be, because it helps clear your mind and can help you focus in another way. So if there's something on your mind and you start exercising, it's almost like it's a consistent, what am I trying to say? It shuts down your brain in a way so that you're able to just not think. And sometimes the answer you're looking for comes while your brain is shut down, not thinking. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my brain. You get it. The other thing, and this was a cool thing to have, is the 3-thought cutoff. And so what that is once a negative or obsessive thought plays in your brain 3 times, what you do is instantly get up and do a different activity. So after 3 times, you cut it off by getting up and doing something else. That could be getting up and exercising, or focusing on anything else. It could be maybe journaling out your thoughts. It could be coloring. I say for ADD people, creativity is a wonderful outlet for us. So even getting those coloring books and doing that, adult coloring books, is always fun. Or jamming out to music, whatever it is. After you hit those 3 thoughts, you're going to get up and focus on something else, and that's going to help you get out of your own head, really. And then the third thing that they suggest here is to write down your goals and review them every day. And then this helps you alleviate your decisions and adjust your behavior so that you're working towards your goals instead of against them. I will say that particularly is really for overfocused ADD, because for me, I can only have, even my therapist and I are working on this, 1 task a day, and that's it. And if I get more done on a list, then that's great. But I have to focus on completing just 1 task a day. Because if I have too many tasks on my list and I try and complete them, I then actually get so hard on myself that I can either slip into like a depressed episode, or I my brain just shuts. I go into executive dysfunction and I just shut down altogether because I'm too overwhelmed. But that's later. So now we're on to type 4, and that is the temporal lobe ADD. These all have the traits of classic ADD, type 1. But it also comes with learning, memory issues, and temper problems. The temper one is really what, now that I'm looking at temporal lobe, which is why there's temper. You know, shit just like, is that where our temper comes from? Is the temporal lobe? Wait, is that why it's called temper? Sidetracking, I'm sorry. Anyways, type 4 is going to be the temporal lobe. It's going to have temper problems. That's the main thing. Once again, same thing of decreased blood flow during concentration in the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and the basal ganglia. But there could be either increased or decreased blood flow to the temporal lobe. Let me see if my little chart has the temporal lobe. Doesn't have it here either. I'm sorry, guys. My chart does not have where the temporal lobe is, but you can look that up. So with that one, they may or may not be hyperactive. They also have mild paranoia, irritability, periods of spaciness or confusion, auditory processing issues is one here, periods of panic and or fear for no reason, headaches or abdominal pain of no uncertain origin, dark thoughts. I will say the suicidal and self-harm thoughts can pretty much be across the board for neurodivergent people. So, but it is even more in the temporal lobe ADD. They could have possible learning disabilities, and once again, they may or may not be hyperactive. Now, there are obsessive compulsive disorder people who have temporal lobe ADD as well, and they have memory challenges, behavioral problems, once again, sudden bursts of anger and paranoia. And it does say here that this type has been correlated with previous head injuries and toxic or infectious exposure, because some neuroscientists are finding that ADD, while it is genetic, sometimes it can be caused by brain injury. A lot of, like, of course, with athletes, if they have the TBI, the brain injuries, it can actually cause a neurodivergent mental difference. I don't like saying disorder. It's a difference. So during aggressive periods, type 4 individuals may be defiant towards parents or authority figures. Very much don't tell me what to do type thing. So this one, the recommendations that they have for managing are all, well, for one of them anyway, is natural remedies. So essential oils that are going to promote, soothing, dietary changes, including more protein, healthy fats, and fewer carbohydrates. Once again, aerobic exercise, which is across the board for everybody. Although for the temporal lobe ADD, they say intense exercise, 30 to 45 minutes a day. And I think that's because there's more aggressive tendencies. And then also a breathing technique. So this one, if you are vibing with the temporal lobe, I'm going to just read out what this breathing technique is. It's the 3-6-10. 3-6-10. You inhale for 3 seconds through your nose, hold for 1 second, exhale for 6 seconds, hold for 1 second, and then you repeat 10 times. So it's actually it's 3-1-6-1. 3-1-6-1. So why do they call it 3 times 6 times? 3 plus 6 times 10. This is, once again, this is me breaking it down even more. It is 3-1-6-1. I'm renaming it 3-1-6-1. You inhale for 3 seconds, hold for 1 second, exhale for 6, and then hold for 1. And then you repeat that 10 times. And it says this will take less than 2 minutes. So if you're feeling that aggressive tendency come up, 3-1-6-1. That's what I'm renaming it because that makes more fucking sense. All right, now we're moving on to type 5. Type 5 is going to be limbic ADD. And this one, once again, the decreased blood flow in the underside of the prefrontal cortex, cerebellum, and the basal ganglia that are seen in types 1 through 4. However, there is almost too much activity in the deep limbic system. And that means it's involved, all of this is involved with your mood, with how, so this one, if you deal with depression a lot more, that's going to be heavy under type 5. So they see the glass is half empty. Chronic low-grade sadness also happens. Frequent irritability, tendency for social isolation, frequent feelings of helplessness, loss of interest in things, sleep changes, either too much or too little, and they may or may not be hyperactive. So this is all tied to your emotions, to your emotions. And it says it's frequently misdiagnosed as depression. However, when individuals with this type are given antidepressants, it can increase their moodiness and negative symptoms, which is quite interesting. And there's another type coming up further as well, where a medicine that's given for one diagnosis can actually have negative effects on this type of ADD. So, because here's the thing, depression and ADD can be two separate things, but anxiety and depression can also be offshoots of ADD. So, it's an interesting thing. But anyway, yeah, so if you have limbic ADD, the antidepressants can actually increase the moodiness and negative symptoms. And high stress levels, of course, are major triggers for depression and limbic ADD. Although, honestly, high stress levels for anybody with ADD is not good. So the way to manage a type 5 is to learn how to structure your thoughts and actions. So all or nothing obviously sets you up for failure and will cause emotional distress. So learn how to structure your thoughts to make them manageable and doable. Create strategies that will allow you to calm yourself down when you are triggered. This is going, once again, towards a homeopathic natural remedy. So essential oils, that will boost your mood, like peppermint, lavender, grapefruit, that sort of thing that will like boost your mood. And then surround yourself with positive people, honestly. It's going to help your negative thinking patterns if you surround yourself with people who encourage you, who also think positive, and that support conversational bonding. Basically build strong relationships around you, so that they're the ones who can help you come out of those moods as well. And I think, and I said before, I'm gonna do another video on the correlation between PTSD, or rather how we're raised, our childhood trauma, and being neurodivergent, and how you're brought up, if you have that loving community, or if you don't have that loving community, how it can exasperate the symptoms. I think there's definitely a correlation. I have heard about it. So I'm going to do more research on that, and I'll do a video on that. Back to this though. Type 6 is the Ring of Fire ADD. Doesn't that sound exciting? It's not exciting. But just to say I have the Ring of Fire ADD, that sounds kind of cool. Also, I do vibe with this type as well. I'm going to get into it though. So, Ring of Fire ADD is too much activity in several areas of the brain. So it's not that that decreases levels, it's that there's like too much activity in different layers of the brain, both at rest and during concentration. Because when they do brain testing, they do testing, okay, let's see how your brain is at rest and how is it at concentration. And then on brain images, it looks like a ring pattern, which is why it's called the Ring of Fire. They have difficulty concentrating because their brains won't slow down. That is me. All right, so symptoms are irritability, impulsivity. We're back to that impulsivity. Sensitivity to noise, light, clothes, or touch. If you've seen videos of other creators who talk about ADD, when they say, oh, like clothes, all of a sudden will get irritating to them and they want to take off their clothes, noise, light. I'm very sensitive to noise sometimes, where I have to wear my earbuds. If I'm out peopling in the world, I have to wear either one or both of my earbuds in almost all the time now, because everything sounds extra noisy to me. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. Periods of mean, nasty, or insensitive behavior. Grandiose or inflexible thinking. Grandiose can literally be us having grand ideas of what we want, but not knowing how to narrow it down to more manageable things. We have this grand idea of what we want to do, and then we do it, and then we also don't follow through after doing that grandiose thought. Or inflexible thinking, once again, feeling like our way is the better way, basically. Talking fast, racing thoughts, and appears anxious or fearful, and it may or may not be hyperactive. I also am anxious all the time. It could be correlated with allergies or inflammation. And this is what's also very interesting about our mental difference, is that a lot of it is tied, once again, mind, body, and spirit is connected. A lot of it is tied to what we eat or how our body, the environment we are in, literally the environment we're in, and what we eat and consume. So it can be correlated with allergies or inflammation in the body. So people can have both Ring of Fire ADD and bipolar disorder. And some studies suggest that as many as half of the people with bipolar disorder also meet the criteria for type 6 ADD. Type 6 is made worse with stimulant and serotonergic, serotonin enhancing medications alone, which is interesting. So for instance, some people on ADD, right, they take Adderall because it's supposed to like help you focus. But since that's a stimulant, it could actually be a negative thing for people with type 6 ADD. So that's really interesting. So with this one, again, since it can be tied to allergies and inflammation, the way to manage it is, we're getting back to that holistic, but particularly the diet that you have. So they say to try an elimination diet, which is basically what you do is you go on a cleanse, and or what you can do is, it's eliminating certain foods, but that can be done with a cleanse. I sometimes do an Ayurvedic cleanse where it's a dish called kachari, and that's all you eat, and it helps cleanse your entire body, and then you can slowly start to bring back in regular normal foods you'd eat and see how your body reacts to it. So that's what an elimination diet is as well. Process of eliminating certain foods. Corn, soy, dairy, gluten, sugar, and artificial sweeteners are no's. I will say with soy, that one is a double-edged sword because genetically modified soy is definitely not good. But soy itself is not bad. But anyways, corn, soy, but take these out of your diet and see how your body reacts to it and how your brain reacts to it. And so it says this short-term eating plan can help to identify any foods that are causing allergies and other digestive reactions. Exercise, of course, once again, 30 to 45 minutes of exercise daily is going to help with any type of ADD. And this says also the third way to manage, kill the automatic negative thoughts. They're also called ants, but automatic negative thoughts that pop into your head and cause you to get upset or depressed. Now, the way I always handle ants is I flip the thought. So if I have a thought if I have a negative thought, I jot it down and then I write the opposite of it. And I'm literally talking the very language, right? Maybe saying an automatic negative thought could be, I am not worthy. I am not worthy of this opportunity. I am not worthy of anything. Flip it and say, I am worthy. Another thing to ask yourself is, if you have a thought and it's like, oh, this isn't going to work, but what if it does? That's always a good way as well to be like, but what if it does? Just to insert that, but what if it does? Let's not think that it's always going to fail. What if this works? What if this works? So write down the negative thought and then literally flip it and write the exact opposite. And that means keeping negative words out as well. So like, don't put not, don't, any of those words. Like the flip side of that thought, when you write it down, needs to be like all positive language. So that's the way to kill the ants. Yes, by writing a more realistic version. Type 7, this is anxious ADD. Anxious ADD, obviously, from the name, all anxiety. So this one is increased activity in the basal ganglia, which my chart does have that, which is going to be, you know, the little thing here that looks like a thing. So it's increased activity in that area. And, but there's also decreased activity during concentration in the underside of the prefrontal cortex and cerebellum. Symptoms: frequent anxiety or nervousness, tense and stressed out, predicts the worst, conflict avoidance, fear of being judged, tendency to clam up in social situations, physical stress systems such as headaches, and then dislikes or gets excessively nervous speaking in public. So basically stage fright. Now it says, unlike the other types of ADD, people with anxious ADD typically do not seek excitement and conflict. Because since we're low on dopamine, a lot of types will look for ways to increase dopamine, and that is including doing things that excite them, basically, to release that blood flow. And that's different for each person, by the way. The idea of what excites you and what will release the dopamine is different for each person. Some people go bungee jumping. I like to go take a walk in nature. Literally, like, so it can be either way. Okay, and taking ADD medications alone can make individuals with this type even more anxious. So this is why I say it's really interesting to see these different types of ADD and how one size does not fit all. So a medicine that may be helpful for one type can actually be detrimental for another type. And it says they tend to fluctuate over time, so anxiety disorders fluctuate over time, but anxious ADD symptoms are constant all the time. So that is going to be the 7th type. Now this one for anxious ADD, the ways to manage it is going to be, once again, homeopathic methods, but particularly breath work, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi is a great one as well, but those more slower movement type things that are going to calm your body down, calm your mind down, which calms your body down, and then calm your spirit down as well, right? Because once again, everything's all connected. So it's to promote relaxation in the body. So breath work, meditating, as I said, yoga, Tai Chi, different ways of moving your body and moving your breath to calm. Also music, brain enhancing music, especially certain frequency. You can go on YouTube and type in frequency music. It's everywhere. There are different frequencies that can help with different things, and different ways to calm you down that you can listen to while you sleep or anytime you feel yourself having those anxious thoughts. I recommend also brown noise. Brown noise is so good for, it's like somebody scratching an itch in my brain. Brown noise is really good for helping when you feel anxiety. Like when I feel an anxiety attack coming on, even just a hint of anxiety, not even a full-on attack, just a hint of anxiety, I will play some brown noise music in my head, or the noise itself in my head, and it helps just like zone me out. Another one it says is laughing. Laughing releases stress-reducing endorphins into your bloodstream. Laughter truly is the best medicine. Now you just got to find somebody who can make you laugh. And that leads to the 3rd one, which is talking to friends and family about it and let them know when you're emotionally overwhelmed. I'm going to add something onto this though, and that is that I think everybody, if they are financially able to, should get a therapist or a support group. Support groups tend to be pretty much free. So if you can find a support group, even better. If you can't afford a therapist, get a support group. Because what I found with myself is that when I was having depressed thoughts or thoughts of anxiety, I didn't want to tell my friends and family because I didn't want to be a burden to them. Because I already feel like just my mental differences alone and how I show up is a burden to my family and friends. Of course, they would say the complete opposite. They would say, Janae, you're a joy. We love having you in our lives. You're very unique and all of that, right? We love the way your brain works. But still, it doesn't push aside growing up feeling like who I am is not worthy. Who I am is causing issues for the people around me. Who I am is a burden to people. So they say this is one way to manage, but as somebody who has ADD, I think the better thing is for you to find a support group. If you're able to talk to your friends and family, that's great. I know for me, it was very hard to get past my people pleasing, to be accepted. I felt like if I shared what was going on with me and the thoughts I was having, that I wouldn't be accepted. And so I just didn't, and not even not be accepted, but once again, I would be a burden on them. and eventually they'd leave me. There's always the fear of being left behind because we are who we are. So yeah, that's one thing I would add to that. Yes, talk to friends and family if you're mentally able to, but if you feel that that's too much for you, if you also have that thought that I don't want to be a burden on my friends and family, then find a support group, or once again, if you're financially able, get a therapist. My therapist, I'm not lying to you, has saved my life. So I would suggest that that would be a way to go. So those are the 7 different types of ADD. I hope you learned something. I hope it made you know yourself a bit more. I vibed with 2 of the different types. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I need to get like full-on brain scans to see which one I actually am. But the inattentive and the ring of fire sounded basically like me. But anyways, if you have any more questions, or if there's an idea of something you want me to talk about concerning ADD, then you can let me know that as well. Until then, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow me for more information. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.